packaged processed cookies are not being used to make fucking rockets. What is this? Hamas fueling their rockets with cookies?
When the population has always had a calorie surplus.
Yeah, even the diet part.
Calorie surplus.
They literally have. That's why when the famine started, when all the people were moved, I believe it was UNRWA that made the statement that this is a region that has never experienced hunger before.
That's what's so infuriating.
That's also why Finkelstein got mad, because if you try to say, really, wait, these people are starving? By what metric? You can't find
that's what's so infuriating, Stephen, is that you want to start counting calories and try to discover whether they have a surplus or not, when you're missing the fact that Israel getting to decide what food gets into Gaza is itself outrageous.
Right.
One people does not get to control whether another side gets to have cookies for their children,
and you know
or potato chips or sodas. You don't get to do that. That's a level of dominance and oppression that is unacceptable.
But you're not capable of having it because you won't even admit why the blockade exists. So you don't even deserve to be in. What do you want him to admit?
Yeah. Wow. The Israel defender says that you can't even have this conversation. You don't deserve to have this conversation. Only I get to have this conversation because I'm pro-Israel. Ay, ay, ay.
What do you want him to admit?
Why is there a blockade in Gaza?
Yeah, you tell me.
Why is there a blockade in Gaza?
When you look at the fact that Israel is preventing cookies from going into Gaza, you know that it's not motivated by military.
Why were cookies being prevented from going in?
And
what were custom rockets fueled with?
Yeah, with cookies? Yeah.
With sugar and fertilizer. Yes, that's how they made the early rockets, the first generation.
Okay, I will admit, it is genuinely impressive how much dick riding this dude is able to do. Because, like, it is in some ways impressive that, like, a guy who literally thought Recep Tayyip Erdogan was the president of Israel like 3 months ago knows this level of, like, Hasbara propaganda. Like, this is the type of shit that you hear from, like, not even Alan Dershowitz at that point. You know what I mean? Like, there's certain landmines that those who have dedicated their lives to doing propaganda for Israel won't even touch. He fucking steps on the landmine and does not even give a shit if he comes across like an unhinged psycho. He said, yeah, dude, cookies can't go into Gaza because that's how Hamas rockets are made. Like, that's how we make the Hamas rockets. It's crazy.
Deny Palestinians in Gaza sugar because it might be used.
You know what? First of all, they're allowed back in because they use more sophisticated rockets. But again, he's not going to admit it. I just want to be clear another time. Another thing you're not going to admit. Why does the blockade?
Yeah. Why won't Omar? Why won't you admit that cookies are making rockets? He's doing this for clout, right? I mean, this is literally what he loves to do. He's a debate mercenary. This is his favorite shit. Doesn't matter how fucking truly unconscionable or how ridiculous the statements he's making are. He's in it. He's in the pocket. Did you go to the Frank Tyson case? No.
It exists. Yes. It's literally just because of the
Hamas fighters breathe air.
The funniest part about it is that the funniest part about this stuff is that, like, he's arguing on, like, the most idiotic positions because he doesn't give a shit. And it's not like his fan base cares. His fan base likes the high notes that they can, like, capture in conversations like this, only to make it seem like he actually won a conversation or whatever, regardless of what the truth is, right? But what is truly hilarious about it is that, like, Israel has also lowered the restrictions from time to time. Like, for example, John Kerry saw that Israel was not allowing pasta into the Gaza Strip and was like, what the fuck are you doing? That's pasta. Like, what do you mean pasta is not allowed? So Israel was like, okay, never mind. This shit you don't even hear on Channel 14 in Israel. I've literally never heard of this pasta creativity yet. Like, it's because it's stupid. That's the other reason why you won't hear it. Because at least, like, as arrogant as, like, the Israeli administrators are, right? As comfortable as they are with, like, not really receiving any kind of scrutiny, even they recognize, I suspect, that saying cookies can be used for rocket fuel is an unhinged thing to say. Israel believes that they're using cookies to make rockets is going to make you look like a fucking idiot, right? To the broadest population. They're going to be like, what are you saying? That's insane. Ironic also because like Israel itself will then allow cookies in because they obviously know that this is like ridiculous. It makes them look bad. So whenever the United States of America says like, what the fuck are you doing? Let this shit in. They'll say, okay, never mind. Sorry, our bad. So obviously it wasn't being used for motherfucking rocket fuel, you know? He has to be joking, right? No, he's not. I don't know why you're being charitable. He's just unconditionally demonstrating loyalty to Israel. He's literally just simply trying to defend Israel no matter what the point is. He's dug his heels in too deep. It will make him look like a fucking jackass if he turned around and completely went against every single thing that he said this close to the conversation. He also does get a lot of support from people who are desperately looking for anyone and everyone who will say unhinged shit, who are fueled by Islamophobia, who will just defend Israel unconditionally. So I think that is, I think that's part of the reason.
They kill the Amalek, I guess.
Hamas fighters breathe air too. Maybe Israel can restrict air from going into Gaza to make sure that Hamas
But he's saying then the burden should be on Hamas not to use.
It's not,
no, Palestinians have no agency.
No.
Rape is the language of the oppressed.
You don't,
like, they can't help themselves.
You don't punish a civilian population
and I'm the racist
to get at military ones. You don't punish civilian populations.
Like indiscriminately shooting tens of thousands of rockets decade after decade into Israel, like what Hamas does.
The scale
punishing
of Israeli
the civilian population, like selling some of the humanitarian food back to the population.
Just want to make sure.
Digging up tunnels of water pipes and using them to fashion rockets.
Just want to make sure.
All the international aid that comes in and building tunnels and tunnels of cement.
Stephen, did you say that Hamas is turning cookies into missiles?
My understanding is the reason for the restricting of sugar-based products was that the first generation, I think they were called Qassam rockets, were built in really crude shops using combinations of fertilizer and sugars that they would use.
Do you know what the primary component of Hamas explosives is now?
I'm pretty sure now they use more sophisticated stuff, but I don't know. You tell me.
Unexploded Israeli bombs because they've dropped so many over the last.
I don't think that's true.
Yeah. He doesn't think it's true, but it is true. The only reason why he doesn't think it's true is literally because he doesn't fucking read. He only reads Wikipedia pages full of like information that is obviously one-sided so that he can craft a fucking quick, piffy counter argument to what he suspects his interlocutors are going to come at him with. That's the problem. There is a much broader understanding necessary here if you want to truly advocate on behalf of Israel. And this is from the New York Times. It's not like these guys are fucking anti-Israel at all. That's the issue. I don't think that's real. Yeah, you don't think that's real because you don't fucking know anything. You only are looking at information that makes you seemingly look good in short bursts. That's the problem. That's not true.
Decade.
I doubt that's true. I'm sure they do.
With a 10 to 20% failure rate, Hamas then digs them up. The Yasin 105s that you see, blowing up.
Bomberelli. No, this is a very funny thing to just like so publicly be in support of, especially to this degree. If he at least was like a little bit more knowledgeable, he would always be like looking at liberal Zionists and what liberal Zionists are saying, maybe reading a little bit more of the pro-Palestinian, seemingly pro-Palestinian stuff, because that way you can actually understand what the talking points are and craft a counter narrative against it. It's not just about like hearing the fact that a lot of people bring up the cookie conversation or pasta as a part of the blockade, as a part of the Israeli blockade, which they've, in cartoon villain ways have considered putting the Palestinians on a diet, right? Which Bomberelli himself has also made jokes about and thinks is really funny. The reason why he knows the counter talking point to the cookie thing is because he knows that some people bring up the cookie conversation as a talking point. So he looked for what Israel claimed at the time was the reason as to why they were not allowing cookies. That's it. So it doesn't go beyond that. So when a person that he's talking to knows more then Octoberelli on the issue and turns back and says, like, that's ridiculous, okay? As a matter of fact, they're just using, for the most part, they're using bomb parts of unexploded ordinances now. He goes, that's not true. That can't be true. Okay, maybe it's a little true. Well, there you go. That's the difference. That's the difference between someone who isn't making post hoc rationalizations, who's been covering this issue for many, many decades at this point, versus a guy who's making post hoc rationalizations and trying to find counter talking points to what he assumes is going to be an avenue of attack by looking into Wikipedia pages and like trying to fucking create like piffy one-offs and quotes. That's it. That's the issue here. Now, of course, when you do this against people that are not super knowledgeable, you will look like a fucking intellectual giant. And if you can't look like an intellectual giant because your opponent is maybe like a historian or something, okay, then you could just like kind of overwhelm them by yelling. When your talking points don't work, and that's what you basically saw in the Norm Finkelstein debate, where Norm Finkelstein packed him up because he's super stubborn. Okay, counter argument, Hamas has made rocket cookies. Yo, chill, bro. Don't show this. This is actually... The funniest part about this is that ultimately, like, his fan base will then now go and try to find like a singular instance or something that does not actually fit the norm at all, to just be like, actually, you were wrong, because here we found one instance where this guy from Hamas is being interrogated by like the IDF or something and saying like, yes, we do love using cookies for missiles. Those interrogation videos are obviously done under torturous conditions. Those aren't real fucking, those are just propaganda confessions that Israel utilizes, and even people inside of Israel don't really believe them either. It's usually just done to humiliate the Palestinians and Palestinian resistance groups in general. But, you know, the conversation will continue, even though it is objectively ridiculous. It's an objectively ridiculous statement to make.
All these Israeli tanks? Primarily fueled by Israeli explosives.
But I doubt the majority of them are.
But there's
I'm sure there's some amount.
But
also, again, just to reiterate,
more so than cookies.
You're not going to tell me. Well, that's why cookies are no longer the best. Yeah, why does the blockade exist?
I'm going to tell you why the blockade exists.
Okay.
And the reason, by the way, why it includes banning cookies and soda pop and potato chips.
Yes, the Oreos aren't going into the Gaza Strip.
No, I'm sure it's very funny denying children the ability to eat chocolates and toys because they are Palestinian and not Israeli. That's just so incredibly trivial.
Yes.
Incredibly trivial.
The emotional appeals.
And potato chips.
The emotional appeals, dude. I mean, it is pretty fucked up. What do you mean it's an emotional appeal? Like, I'm sorry that makes the argument that you're presenting look fucking significantly worse when you deliver what is actually happening and what the impact is on the broader Palestinian population. Yes, it is indefensible. You choose to defend it. You can't just go, emotional appeals. Be logical. You didn't deliver a logical counter. You simply stated that cookies are being used to make rockets, okay? While simultaneously saying fertilizer and processed sugar is how they make it. Packaged processed cookies are not being used to make fucking rockets. Oh. You tried to bastardize that argument, and when it failed and you look ridiculous, you then turn around and go, oh, you're making an emotional appeal. No, the real goal there is psychological terror. That's what it is.
It's working. We're two more virtue signals away from free Palestinian people. Keep going. Yes.
If it was the other way around, if Hamas was imposing a siege on Israel in which Israeli children were not allowed to do any of that stuff, you would not be sitting here making light of it. It would not be trivial to you because you understand that Israelis are human beings and their children deserve to eat potato chips.
Jewish people. Sorry, hold on.
You do.
Jewish people live in Arab countries around the world.
Wow, that's a really good counter, man. That's a really solid counter. Like, what the fuck? Why that one? You just immediately move the goalpost to something entirely different, okay? And number two, Jewish people now, especially, are perfectly allowed to live in any fucking country they want to live in. As a matter of fact, ironically enough, Yasser Arafat tried to facilitate a reverse migration for Moroccan Jews, which of course nobody wanted to do, and that's fine. But it doesn't even matter in this circumstance. If your goal here is to say like Jews are not safe in any of these Arab countries, like what the fuck do you mean? What is the Abraham Accords? Okay. If we're talking throughout history, Jews were a lot safer under the Ottoman Empire than they were under Christian nations. If we're talking about right now, Jewish people can go to other nations with ease, as a matter of fact, in other Arab nations as well. But none of that has anything to do with Israel's genocidal intent, Israel's genocidal actions, and Israel's blockade. Is this why you tell chat to be normal so we don't look like this? Yes.
You're saying that they all left.
Hold on.
How many, when we talk about the Nakba and the expulsion of Jews, how many Jews lived in the West Bank after 40?
See, there you go. How many Jews live in the West Bank? 750,000. What the fuck do you mean?
Thank you for the deflection.
I didn't deflect. I'm just answering your.
Let him answer about why the blockade exists.
He's not. He's got to do the 52 different talking points first.
The blockade exists.
Oh my God.
I like that he's also, I mean, he obviously is like extra hostile here because the people that he's talking to know what the fuck they're talking about. So he's just like really ramping it up with the gish galloping and also the goalpost moving. It is rather ironic that people who claim to be, you know, debate experts, who are very quick to be like, that's an ad hominem or whatever, are also the first to deploy these kinds of logical fallacies in a conversation when they are met with an opponent that is delivering talking points that they can't effectively counter. That's what you do. It's like hack material, basically. It's like a life jacket for you. It's a life vest. You just immediately rip the fucking parachute cord and hit him with a, well, what about the Jews? What happened with the Aliyahs? As a matter of fact, Jews were expelled from all the Arab nations. It's like, okay, do you agree with that? I don't. Arab nationalism paired up with the legitimate fears that many people faced, like that led to unjustifiable atrocities upon Jewish populations in many of these Arab countries, caused Jews to flee. Okay. Obviously, this was still very beneficial for the Israeli government. As a matter of fact, the Israeli government and Mossad did its own anti-Jewish terror in places like Iraq, specifically to get the Iraqi Jews to move to Israel instead of staying in Iraq. Avi Shlaim has covered this extensively. As a matter of fact, he's an Iraqi Jew living in Israel. He's an Israeli historian, also another one-stater. Shocking, I know. People that understand the history of Israel and have dedicated their whole lives to chronicling its violence are oftentimes not on Octoberelli's side, okay? Here's Time Without Ovo says, post-Freedom Flotilla, some of the worst stuff was lifted. Even then, the policy of separating the West Bank and Gaza persisted. For example, they stopped shit like furniture from going to Ramallah schools. Before 2012, though, Kogat literally calculated humanitarian minimums for food items and then let in less. The point is to make Gazans into a humanitarian problem for the world, so they're not a political problem for Israel. Yeah. You have to hand it to him for somehow being more irritating than Ben Shapiro. Yeah, I think it's even more arrogant, and somehow, and I don't even know how this is possible, but I don't understand how he is more anti-Islam and more Islamophobic than Ben Shapiro is even. I was misinformed and yapped too early. Hamas uses sugar for rocket fuel. I mean, he's hitting the Hamas uses sugar for rocket fuel button. Hamas uses cookies for rocket fuel.
God, okay.
The blockade exists because they want to punish the civilian population in Gaza as a means of putting pressure on Hamas. They're saying as long as we have a government in Gaza that does not play ball with Israel the way the Palestinian Authority plays ball with Israel in the West Bank, the civilian population is going to...
Meanwhile, his suburb is acting like he pulled off some masterful debating. Yeah, because they like him. It's It's not more complicated than that. They like him. They agree with him. They believe in might is right. They also believe that, you know, Arabs and Muslims deserve less and are not real humans, and they're all like a monolithic force of evil on the planet. So no matter what happens, of course, they are going to cope and seethe and try to make it seem like he actually did a phenomenal job. They tried to say that about the debate, it was a dog walking, really, against Norm Finkelstein, where Norm Finkelstein showed him what happens when you are up against someone who is very knowledgeable on the matter and is just as stubborn and also will be annoying back. The pattern of doing cope streams after losing a debate is so funny / cringe. Maybe he likes being dog walked. No, I don't think he likes it. Especially because, like, it's like a boxer, right? Ultimately, if you keep getting beaten down over and over again, right? At a certain point, if you're not good at boxing and your opponents are beating you up, inevitably your fan base is going to dwindle away. So he definitely will go back to tune-up fights over and over again. He does this all the time. He'll go to after the Norm Finkelstein thing, like his fan base immediately were like, don't look at the debate. Look at, I don't know, something that we found out about Norm Finkelstein from like 1987 or some shit. You know what I mean? And they were like trying to do character assassinations against Norm Finkelstein. That's when you know you've lost. You've completely lost, which it doesn't really matter because ultimately the broadest population saw all of the worst moments where he was getting fucking absolutely destroyed, to which they then turned their tactics on to, well, he was just calling him names. He was resorting to name calling, which means he lost. It's like, bro, Destiny is the #1 name caller of all time. What the fuck are we talking about?
To suffer as a means of putting pressure on them and getting somebody else to be in power. The evidence for that is overwhelming. Children's toys were not allowed in at the beginning of the blockade. And when Israel came under intense pressure after the flotilla incident, a bunch of activists tried to basically force medicines to be delivered into Gaza.
On the flotilla incident, they were...
Damn, you hate him? I don't want to. There was a point in time when we were friends. You know, it's embarrassing to admit, but there was a point in time where I thought that he was a former gamer word-saying libertarian who had turned into a truly progressive force, and I was wrong. Many of my oldest subscribers in this community also were duped in a similar capacity. But over the course of the past 5 years, he's had like a John Fetterman style change. Like, you know how John Fetterman went like really aggro on Israel? He went really aggro on the left across the board. But yeah, he does give me a lot of reason. He does. How are you not banned for being anti-Israel in Twitch? Wait, what? It's ridiculous. I wouldn't brag about that. Brag about what? The major reason as to why, like, there's a lot of misinformation out there from diehard fans who have made like videos, documentaries and whatnot, documenting everything in a very one-sided fashion that somehow tries to make Destiny look like the favorable party that was actually wronged. But the reality is, for me, I did the exact same thing with Destiny that I did with XQC and many other people, even Aiden Ross, all the way to the end. I tried as best as I could to just, you know, be normal and be cordial until it was just like impossible. You know what I mean? You will never hear about that, obviously, from his fan base because their resentment towards me is fueled by the resentment that he feels towards me as the greatest evil. I am the worst person. His community literally thinks I'm a worse person than Nick Fuentes. Straight up. If you were to ask many individuals in his community right now, they would say, I am a worse person than Nicholas Fuentes, an actual open neo-Nazi, a worse person than Lawrence Southern. There's a lot of cognitive dissonance there as well, in every single point of contention. Like, people in his community legitimately think that, like, I told an adult black man to be offended by the N-word, or by his white podcast co-host at the time's defense of being able to say the N-word. Like, that Trihex could not have come to that conclusion on his own, that I, a white guy, actually convinced him that it was fucked up. I don't understand how they gauge who's good or bad. It's just entirely dependent on who he hates. If he loves someone, his community loves them. And if he turns on them and decides that they're an enemy, then his community fucking despises that person and will do everything they fucking can to constantly try to humiliate the other person. I mean, it's not an accident that every single time that like Destiny's getting dog walked in public, his fan base immediately turns around and is like, yo, but remember how bad Hasan is. A friend of mine literally likes Nicholas Fuentes more because he's sincere and hates you because you're a grifter. That's what I mean. It's shit like that. Like, that's an insane thing to state.
Where 2 of 5 of the ships were empty, and they were aggressive ships that were designed to fight against the IDF when they landed. You realize that footage is available. There's 100-some people on the deck with chairs throwing Israeli soldiers overboard. And makeshift weapons and everything too.
Makeshift weapons. Wow.
Yeah, I know. Well, that was all they could bring from Turkey with them, I guess, because they were inspecting the boats. But those were not peaceful activist ships. And if you read any of the reports, if you open more than a Finkelstein book and read what actually happened or watch any of the footage that actually happened,
were on that flotilla.
To be fair, I don't agree with this guy that the blockade's purpose is to punish Hamas. No, the blockade's purpose is to punish the Palestinians so they'll rise up against Hamas. It's the same. That's what he said. That's what Omar said, at least. It's the same principle behind like all these sanctions that America places on other countries around the world for the crime of, you know, going against America's foreign interests. That's it. The civilian population, yes, per Smotrich's words, Hamas is an asset. It has no international diplomatic recognition. So long as things don't explode, they can strengthen Hamas and weaken the PA to maintain their status quo, even though Hamas offered increasingly moderate long-term hudnas about 10 times since the 90s. Yeah. No, Israel does utilize Hamas being a designated terror group to their advantage. That's why Benjamin Netanyahu has openly stated his desires to make sure that Hamas is like the only negotiating partner in this process, because he can always control Hamas by violently going into the Gaza Strip. We control how high the fires go, is what he said. Why is he so embarrassed when saying the airships came prepared to fight, the biggest navy in the Mediterranean, barring Turkey?
Were they part of the fighters, or what? Were they?
Listen to yourself.
Wait, did he say that there were makeshift weapons coming in from Turkey? Is he talking about Mavi Marmara?
And makeshift weapons and everything too.
Makeshift weapons. Wow.
Yeah, I know. Well, that was all they could bring from Turkey.
Spending your time reacting to D instead of addressing the sex pest allegations against you? Is this the new thing that we're doing now? We're just like fucking making shit up? That's nice, man. Thank you.
Turkey with them, I guess, because they were inspecting the boats. But those were not peaceful activist ships. And if you read any of the reports, if you open more than a Finkelstein book and read what actually happened or watch any of the footage that actually happened,
were on that flotilla.
Were they part of the fighters, or what? Were they?
Listen to yourself. Listen to
myself. What? You can watch the videos.
There were people who, yes, fought back when Israel boarded their ship in an act of piracy in international water.
Oh, he is defending Mavi Marmara. That's crazy. Okay, Mavi Marmara was a humanitarian flotilla ship. I'm just shocked that he even fucking knows what that is. And not only am I shocked that he knows what that is, I suspect that it's because I suspect that he's probably heard me talk about it. So he like, and therefore he wanted to like find an adequate counter to it. Yeah, the weapons that they found, the makeshift weapons that they found on the ship were like cooking knives and shit. Like knives. That's it. There were no weapons on the ship. That's a lie. It was kitchen utensils.
Israel boarded the ship.
Because they don't want ships to get to Gaza.
There you go, because there's a blockade and because they announced you need to stop.
They don't get to impose that blockade.
They absolutely do.
No more than Hamas gets to impose a blockade on Israel. This is ridiculous. Of course they don't get to decide what ships get to go.
I want to reiterate the by the end here. He's saying that the block.
Yeah. So far, if we are keeping notes, Divorcelli has said, so far we're keeping notes, Divorcelli has said cookies are valid as a blockade target because Hamas uses them to make cookie rockets. And now he's also stated that Israel perfectly was valid into the humanitarian flotilla, Mavi Marmara, and executing, like dropping commandos from a fucking gunship and executing, or not a gunship, from a helicopter, and executing every single humanitarian aid worker. And Israel's own defense for that was ridiculous, like universally ridiculous. People thought that was insane. The boats, the weapons that they captured on the boat. Here, you want to see the makeshift weapons that they captured on the boat? A keffiyeh, one flag, and knives. Those were the weapons that they were sneaking in. Yeah, they killed 10 humanitarian aid workers and injured around, I think, 50. By the way, this was their intel. Like, this was their justification. Now, of course, if you live on this side of the world, if you're not Turkish, you're probably unfamiliar with this incident because I don't think that there was a lot of coverage over this incident in the United States of America. Because this happened a very long time ago, back when people didn't really question what the fuck Israel was doing in terms of like murking humanitarian aid workers. Just so you understand, this is what he is trying to defend here. Humanitarian aid workers trying to bring in humanitarian aid into Gaza. And this is the only thing Israel could find to justify why they killed 10 of the humanitarian aid workers. Also, maybe we would know for sure if, yes, you're right, the U.S. didn't block any attempts for an independent UN investigation. Israel should lead investigation into attack on Gaza flotilla, the U.S. says. So for the record, everything that the United States is currently doing in terms of running defense for Israel, they have been doing for many, many years. What a wild state of affairs that someone personally thinks that this is a defensible position. And the only reason why I think that defenders of Israel consider this to be a defensible position is because most people don't know what the truth is. That's why. But when you actually bring in facts to the conversation, and you bring in facts such as America routinely stopping an independent investigation from being launched into this unjustifiable attack against humanitarian aid workers, and the fact that Israel only found this as proof as to why they had to go in and kill a bunch of humanitarian aid workers, and how that was valid and moral, right? The entire history of Israeli cruelty against Palestinians and those who dare defend their humanity is littered with shit like this. just an unimaginable use of force against people who are simply trying to survive. Always and forever. And this project only works when people are not paying attention. But because of the arrogance demonstrated by the ultra-Zionist, ultra-nationalist Israeli government and the feeling of security that they have in terms of being able to control any kind of messaging that comes out of Israel through direct censorship, they've gone above and beyond in their cruelty. And now the world, especially more importantly, the Western world, is taking notice. So this kind of stuff doesn't work anymore. That's the problem. The problem is Divorcelli is operating with Hasbara talking points from 2010 when we're in 2024. And the situation is dramatically changed.
They don't get to announce. They don't get to impose that blockade.
They absolutely do.
No more than Hamas gets to impose a blockade on Israel. This is ridiculous. Of course, they don't get to decide what ships get to go.
I want to reiterate that by the end here. He's saying that the blockade exists because the Jews are evil.
No, he's saying they're intentionally.
That's a despicable thing to say.
Really?
I'm not saying anything about Jews. I'm talking about the Israeli government policy.
What
being
you can't? Okay,
horrendous.
I'm curious. In the second Intifada.
I'm sorry. I don't like the argument that you presented, which is why I've decided to put words in your mouth, because I think that in and of itself will favor me. That's great. Why do people have this dumbass on their program? Because he's one of the only people that will go to the most despicable lengths to defend Israel this much. And as the overarching attitude changes dramatically against Israel, there are less and less people who will put their own personal reputation on the line to defend what is truly indefensible. We're talking about a dude who will defend the top of the hour ad break and say that at the top of the hour there is a 3-minute ad break and you shouldn't do anything against it. Even though there is something you can do against it, which is a $5 a month subscription or a free one in the form of a Twitch Prime. Or you can get gifted a sub if you're lucky. Really? Okay, I'm curious. And the second Intifada is such a good example of how disingenuous the just asking questions chatter sound. Yeah. Here's a 3-minute ad break now. Miss Susie B, thank you for the 5 gifted subs. Having a goatee without losing a bet in 2024 is crazy. Yeah. So he's openly Islamophobic. He's just a hypocritical piece of shit. Yeah. I mean, he has admitted as much. That is what it... I think that's definitely one of the major motivators here. Might is right politics and Islamophobia. Most defense of Israel can be reduced to unrestricted Islamophobia and might is right politics. And for those of you saying, I really don't get it, why does he defend Israel like this? I think you need to understand it doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter. He's Islamophobic. Israel's killing a shitload of Muslims. He likes that. It's great opportunity for him to be contrarian. It's more so about the fight rather than what you're fighting for. And unfortunately for him, because it's so goddamn indefensible, despite the fact that there's a lot of motivation from people in positions of power to try to defend Israel, to make this seem more permissible, he is looking worse and worse every time he appears on these sorts of programs to try to defend the unimaginably cruel actions of the Israeli state.